Good morning, it's Denise Willier here, and today I wanted to talk about what's been going on at Facebook. So I've titled this video, Facebook, is it too little, too late? And I'm going to attempt to answer this question through the course of this video. And I'm particularly going to look at it from the perspective of us being business owners and leaders, from the perspective of brand reputation and of leadership in an organisation as well. And I hope to give you some useful tips about what you as a and some lessons that you as a business owner can draw from this particular video and the situation in which Facebook finds itself, because I think there are some really useful, valuable learnings. So what I'm going to cover in this video is a quick overview of the background and where we find ourselves today. Obviously this is a very fast moving story, so this is kind of as of the reporting up to yesterday. The particular problems and challenges that Facebook is facing, Facebook's response to the crisis thus far, what I think Facebook should have done, and then we're going to move on and link it to you and your business and some lessons that you might draw from this and some things that you might want to think about in relation to your own business. So before I get into my content, just a very brief introduction about me. I was a chief executive for 8 years. I did my management training at Cranfield School of Management, which is one of the UK's top business schools. I've got 25 years of senior management and leadership experience, and for the past 4 years or so I have been consulting on business and leadership. And if you'd like to know more about me, then just check out my website www.denisewillier, where you can find further information about me and lots of articles that I've written on business and leadership. So let's get into the meat of this topic. So first of all, we're going to kick off with a quick overview of where we find ourselves right now. And I just want to start off by saying that these kind of crises and scandals that you see affecting corporates rarely come out of the blue. These are crises that have been in the making for quite some while and relate to issues that the founders, that the managers and directors haven't dealt with, and we're going to get into that a bit later on in the course of this video. So I've been following the reporting on Cambridge Analytica, on the role of Facebook in the EU referendum, on the role of Facebook in the US election. So I wasn't at all surprised by the events of the past week and the crisis that this social media giant finds itself in right now. So just to go back through the background, the plot, if you like it, because I'm going to use a theatre analogy a little bit during the course of this video. So if we go back to early 2014, what we learned in the past week was that 270,000 people took an online personality test, which seems to have led to the information of 50 million of their Facebook friends being passed on to those villains in Channel 4's secret film into Cambridge Analytica. And if you haven't seen the videos that Channel 4 made, the secret filming, go onto their YouTube channel and you will find it all there. And all I'm going to say about Cambridge Analytica is that it's a really particularly nasty company, and its raison d'etre for the past 20 years has basically been to foment coups, particularly in developing countries, and to manipulate government elections, again, particularly in developing countries. And there's lots of reporting starting to emerge around that, particularly look at Carol Cardwala's really phenomenal reporting in The Guardian on all of this. She's been sort of unravelling the whole story. So we discovered that Facebook actually learnt about these Cambridge Analytica breaches over 2 years ago, and again that was as a result of this very, very dogged reporting by Carol Cardwalla for The Guardian, and that they had Facebook had failed to alert its users that this data had been used by third parties for commercial purposes, and they took really pretty limited steps to recover the data in question. So the plot thickened, and another whistleblower appeared by the name of Sandy Parakailis, and he claimed that hundreds of millions more people were likely to have had their information harvested by outside companies, and that Facebook barely had any systems in place for monitoring how their information and data is used. And Parakailis, I assume that's how you say the name, that's my best attempt at it, says that he warned senior executives at Facebook that their lax approach to data management really represented a major breach. And actually, if you dig a bit further into the story, what you will know is that Facebook, let me just check the detail of this, Facebook were actually sanctioned by the FTC probably 4 years or so ago now, and they are under a consent decree. So there's that kind of rumbling around in the background as well about this story. So last week we found out from The Guardian that this personal data had been harvested from 50 million people and used by Cambridge Analytica to manipulate voters in the US election. And actually breaking reporting over the last 24 hours about how it was also used to manipulate voters in the Brexit election, in the EU referendum, which led to Brexit as well. So what happened was that by last Monday, Facebook shares had slid by around 6.77%. That had knocked about 58 billion off the value of the company, as investors started to worry about the consequences of these revelations. Delete Facebook became the top trending hashtag on Twitter. I was on Twitter quite a lot yesterday, tweeting about the March for Our Lives, and saw that there was still a lot of tweeting going on around delete Facebook. And throughout the week, whilst Zuckerberg was maintaining his silence, the hashtag Where's Zuck was also trending as well. And then we also found that the US Senator Ron Wyden has sent Zuckerberg a detailed list of questions about the breach, demanding answers, and that there's a bipartisan move by the Senators Amy Klobuchar and John Kennedy, who want hearings with CEOs of not just Facebook, but also of Twitter and Google. And then here in the UK, the MP Damian Collins, who chairs the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, bit of a mouthful that, he's asked for Zuckerberg to appear in person because the committee is fed up with Facebook sending representatives who aren't able to answer their questions. So they want Zuck to appear in person. And there's also a petition been launched here in the UK, which is calling for Zuck to testify to Parliament as well. So quite a lot been going on in the last few days, and that's essentially where we're going to pick up the story. And so particularly in the business world in general, reputation, as we know, is everything. But when you're a corporate, reputation is all the more important, because according to an article that was published in the Harvard Business Review, around 70 to 80% of the value of a company's shares on the stock market derive from hard to access intangible assets such as brand equity, brand capital, and goodwill. And the effect of this kind of higher brand equity and brand capital is that the really top flight companies are able to hire and retain the very best people, because they can be competitive on pay and terms and conditions. It means they're in a position to charge more for their products. It means they can achieve better profit margins, and that means that they benefit from higher share ratings, which creates a virtuous circle which kind of goes round and round and sort of drives and perpetuates those factors. And so a corporate company with a poor reputation starts to have problems hiring and keeping the best talent. It gets treated with suspicion by government and regulators. We can talk about that in a minute. And they start to be shunned by their customers and their investors. And we're going to get into that in just a minute as well. And so in Facebook, what we're seeing is what it's like to lose a corporate reputation, of which a key component is its value on the stock market. And I suppose what I find deeply ironic about all of this is that one of the ways that reputations are made and lost is through our network, through our business network. And the stories about Facebook are rippling through its own network as users debate whether or not they should delete Facebook, whether they should be looking for to base themselves on another platform or not. So I've certainly seen quite a lot of discussion myself on that in the last few days when I've been on Facebook, and obviously all of the stories from the key media outlets being shared on Facebook as well. So a sort of deep irony around that. So where Facebook sort of finds itself now is that its stock is down around 14.5% on its peak. So that's still 18% up on where it was a year or so ago, just about a year ago. So, you know, it's not like Facebook's stock value has been decimated or anything. But it's also just worth noting that in addition to what is going on with Facebook and the reaction of investors and of advertisers on the platform to the crisis, there's also something else going on in the stock exchange, which is that we had Trump's announcing the move to impose tariffs on a number of Chinese products, and to introduce barriers to the Chinese foreign direct investment entering the US. And that hasn't helped the mood of the stock market either. And we've seen the stock market in the past few days shed nearly 3% as well. So that additional factor doesn't help Facebook either, that wider context. So let's move on to look at the challenges for Facebook. And I see 6 particular challenges. So the first is really around reputation. So as I've been saying, losing your reputation is really one of the biggest risks that a company can face, particularly when it's a corporate and its value is related to its share price. So any corporate company is going to have a risk management plan, and in that risk management plan, particularly if you're a corporate, but which any company should have, is a section on reputation management and the risks of losing your reputation. And looking at this kind of unfolding drama from the outside and from the perspective of having been a CEO, and having been a CEO where I took our risk management plan to the board every 3 months. Every quarter I would take my risk management plan to the board, which I had sat down and updated with my senior management team. Sometimes it didn't change very much at all. Sometimes, you know, there would be changes that would be more noteworthy, particularly when there were quite severe economic constraints. But every quarter I took that risk management plan to the board. They looked at it, asked me some searching questions about it, and that was an essential part of our corporate governance. And so what this is telling me is that there is weak corporate governance by the board, because on the face of it, it doesn't look like Facebook has a very good risk management plan, certainly with regard to managing its reputation. So I'm going to explain in a minute why I think that is. So when you've got a crisis that is as damaging to your reputation as Facebook, the first most important action that you can take really is a wholehearted public apology, where you're expressing regret, where you acknowledge full responsibility, and you make some sort of offer of reparation that goes beyond mere words. And I haven't seen Facebook really doing this. So that is why I think that Facebook could do with a better risk management plan, and to really have to be thinking through in more detail their reputation management as well. So the second factor is that this is not the first time that there's been a serious data breach. You know, I referred to one earlier on. I referred to the whistleblower who says that this is far, far bigger than has thus far been reported, and that senior executives took no action. We've also seen senior executives appearing to dodge Congress and to dodge the House of Commons Select Committee. So I know from feedback I've had with MPs is that our MPs here in the UK are really, really furious with Facebook for not sending anybody of real seniority to come and talk to them, and pointing out the irony that Zuckerberg won't show up with them, but he's more than happy to don a shirt and tie, when we all know he's always in his grey t-shirt and hoodie, but was very happy to don a suit and tie in order to meet with the Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, struggle with that name, when they wanted to enter into the Russian market. So yeah, so lots of problems with reputation. We've got a sort of enveloping, sort of a moving crisis with the question of what's next. So we've got all of this looking to unfold. We've had the news breaking in the last 24 hours around Cambridge Analytica's role in the EU election, and I would be amazed if there isn't further reporting about that in relation to Facebook as well. We've also got other EU elections, so I would be amazed if France and Germany and Holland and some of the other countries aren't looking at the role of Facebook in their elections. We also there was also the referendum in Catalonia, and I imagine that the Spanish government is going to be wanting to look at the role of Facebook there in fomenting dissent. And like I say, allegations of further data breaches yet to unravel. So I think that there's a lot more different ways in which this scandal could potentially unfold. And so you then have to think about the response of Mark Zuckerberg thus far, and was that response sufficient to meet that potential unfolding crisis? You've then got to think about the hand that feeds Facebook, and in this instance, it's the advertisers, and who basically fund the platform. I think it was something like £40 billion worth of income. I'm not sure if it's dollars or pounds, but 40 billion paid out in advertising on the platform last year. So the advertisers are in a very, very powerful position, and Facebook was actually scheduled to have a crunch meeting with major advertisers after the ISBA, which is the trade body here in the UK, which represents the leading UK advertisers, indicated that 3,000 of its members were actually ready to cut links. And its members include Procter & Gamble and Unilever, and Unilever take a very robust response to corporate social responsibility. So there's not been a lot around this in the news, but that's something to watch for, because these advertisers have considerable clout with Facebook. And where, a few months ago we might have thought that perhaps they're not going to cut their links with the platform, they're not going to use their bargaining power around the money they spend on advertising. We've seen a lot of examples recently of corporates stepping up and taking positions that a few months ago, even 3 months ago, you just would not have thought was possible. So I'm thinking particularly of the companies who've come out in the gun control debate over in US, and the just even yesterday, the story about how the owner of the Patriots, who actually gave £1 million to Trump's election campaign, flew students and their parents from Parkland to the demonstration in Washington, treated them as if they were flying first class, and everybody who was on that plane received a personal letter from the CEO about how inspired he was by their courage. So we're seeing some really interesting cultural shifts in corporates. So I think that's something to watch very, very carefully in relation to Facebook and the power of advertising. The fourth pressure is regulatory pressure. So I've just sort of talked a little bit about how the US Senate and the UK Commons Select Committee have been trying to have a dialogue with Facebook about how to more responsible management of its data. Similar conversation, I'm sure, going on with the EU as well. And they've not really, they've been pretty resistant to the idea of any kind of regulation, because that has a real impact on its online advertising model. It goes to the heart of Facebook's actual business model. And so it's facing regulatory pressures, and what it has right now are some really pissed off senators and MPs who are not really, I think, in the mood to take any nonsense from Facebook right now. And so if Facebook don't come to the table and be willing to look at regulation, I think they're going to find that this is enforced upon them, whether they like it or not. And then the fifth problem is really going to the business model itself, because the business model is all about profiling the data of its 2.5 billion users, segmenting that data, and then using that data, allowing advertisers rather to use that data in their targeting, and that's how it funds its business. So there's a very, very serious business model issue for Facebook to address here. And then there's the PR crisis itself as well. So the PR crisis really has three, I suppose, key components to it. So the first is the data privacy component. So that's playing out with the Cambridge Analytica story in the US and in the UK. The second component is Facebook's newsfeed itself, and the question I think that everybody's asking is, can we trust what's in that newsfeed, and can we trust that it is that what we're seeing is true and accurate news? And then there's a kind of broader question that is sort of starting to bubble up, which is around a kind of cultural reckoning around social media and the time that we spend on it, the resources that we invest in it as well. So this sort of PR crisis is really coming off the back of the 2016 US election, where there was the reporting is well established now that fake news spread way faster than true news stories, and that the Kremlin had supported a misinformation campaign, basically. So the public perception of Facebook before all of this arose was not in the best of places, and this, I suppose, this new developing scandal is really the kind of match, if you like, that's going to light the tinderbox. That was the situation in which Facebook found itself a week ago. So that's kind of a run through the different issues that Facebook and challenges that Facebook's got to deal with. So let's just look a little bit at Facebook's response. And there's a couple of maxims that I want you to really think about and commit to memory for your own business, which is that problems generally do not age well in business. They do not get better for leaving them to kind of gather dust. They will get worse. And so that's the second maxim, that problems generally are worse than we think they are as well. So, and particularly if you run a large business where you're the sort of got a number of staff reporting to you, what you will find is that you're the boss, and people are not always willing to tell you exactly what they think, because they are kind of worried about how you as the boss are going to react to that. So there's a second maxim, which things are often worse than you think there are. So in this instance, it took Zuckerberg 5 days to break his silence on a scandal that has been really enveloping his company, and had already inflicted reputational damage. It had already wiped £58 billion off of the value of its shares. And I just want you to think about that for a minute, because this is really quite staggering for a company of its wealth. This is a company with extraordinary assets. Its valuation a year ago was 500 billion. That's how much Facebook was worth. I said earlier it's bringing in at least 40 billion a year in revenues from advertising, and I don't have the figures about its reserves to hand, but I think we can be confident that Facebook has really quite significant reserves. Facebook is in the position to bring in the very best people, and what it could have done as in response to this crisis is bring in the very best company in the world for the management of its brand reputation. And given the response that there has been thus far, with it taking 5 days for Zuckerberg to even say anything, for the whilst the Where's Zuck campaign was gathering steam, for stories to emerge in the press about how there was a staff meeting about the crisis, but Zuckerberg was nowhere to be seen. Like I say, this is really quite extraordinary, and that tells me that the company isn't taking the problem seriously enough, that it's behaving still like a scrappy startup and not like a major corporate, and hasn't got the governance processes in place that it should have. And it also tells me that they don't understand the extent of the problems they're in. So that's what this is. That's what this is telling me. Because if they did, then their PR this week, their management of their reputation, would have been markedly different. So we had that statement from Zuckerberg, and then those the interviews that he did with CNN and others, and then we also had it a few days for Sheryl to say anything, Sheryl Sandberg, and her first kind of comment was to say, we know that this was a major violation of people's trust, and I deeply regret that we didn't do enough to deal with it. What we saw from her publicly was her, I think, either liking or sharing Zuckerberg's post. So, there's not really much of an action there. And then she said something in an interview that I thought was really quite extraordinary. So this was probably an interview 2-3 days ago. You can find it on YouTube. And she said, if I could relive last week, I'd get out fast. We were trying to get to the bottom of this and take strong action. And it's this statement about, if I could relive this last week, I'd get out fast. And it's like I said, they're not a scrappy startup. This is a company with huge, significant resources. It must have a communications department. It has the resources and the funds to bring in the very, very best people. So that to me was really just a staggering statement. So yeah, there was an apology. It was a step in the right direction, but it was an apology that was effectively demanded by people, and in my view, it fell very, very well short of what was necessary to restore trust and confidence and to stem the tide of the reputational damage that it is currently experiencing. And I'm saying that from the perspective of having been a CEO myself. Now, sometimes as a CEO, the best course of action is to keep quiet, because what you want to do is to avoid misstatements. You want to get to the facts as quickly as possible. So you don't want to put out a statement that isn't true. But in this circumstance, this was not one of the times to be silent, because like I say, this story hadn't come out of the blue. you know, there's already this consent agreement from the FTC out from 4 or 5 years ago. The Guardian had alerted Facebook to the problem back in late 2015. So, you know, the company have had plenty of time to be, you know, to formulate a response to this and know exactly what it, you know, to be prepared for all of this. So, what should Facebook have done? Well, I've talked a bit about a risk management plan, and as part of the risk management plan, that you think about how you're going to manage any potential risks to your reputation. So I'm not going to go any more detail about that, because I think we've covered that already. In this particular instance, I want to sort of like go back sort of like to a sort of theatre analogy, which is that there are kind of, in a sense, 4 stages, 4 acts for what has needed to happen. So the first was the curtain went up in Act 1, and that was the time to issue a very profuse and sincere apology, say that they, you know, make it clear that the company wanted to be very transparent, and I think to say at that point that it was ready to testify to the US Senate, ready to testify to the UK Select Committee, as well as any committees in the EU as well. So, you know, just, you know, come straight out of the ballpark with a very strong, unequivocal apology that makes it very clear that they are ready and willing to cooperate with these different bodies and work together to find a solution to the sort of management of their data management. So that's what they should have done. And what you effectively had was Zuckerberg. I don't know if he got stage fright, I don't know whether he forgot his lines, but basically he went silent. He didn't appear on stage for 5 days. Neither did he appear in front of his employees to talk to and reassure his employees about what was going on. Neither did Sheryl Sandberg either. They sent in one of their counsel, I think it might have been the deputy counsel to the company, to have a 30-minute meeting with them. I mean, that's just appalling. So the lead actor in this drama, who is Zuckerberg, the CEO of the company, he didn't take to the stage in the way that he needed to. So the next stage is really to go before Congress, to go before the UK Common Select Committee, as well as with any committees with the EU, and sort of just be really upfront and say, we are here to work with you, we want to talk to you about regulation. We want to get together and find a solution that works for everybody and be part of be part of solving this as a problem. And all we got from Zuckerberg was, maybe we should be regulated. So he hasn't conceded and accepted this point as of yet. So that's what the next step would be. And then step 3 would be actually sitting down with the relevant government committees and working out a solution to this. Now that's going to be a pretty complex issue, because certainly in the US it would involve a number of committees, and would probably also probably involve the Intelligence Committee as well. So it's going to be quite a complex process. You've then got the EU and you've also got the UK as well, but it's to sit down and be seen to be actively cooperating with those bodies to find a solution. And then obviously once that solution arrives, then there's the implementation of it. So that's really what Zuckerberg should have done and didn't. So I'm now just going to move on and talk a little bit about what lessons you as a business owner can draw from this and what you might apply to your own business. So the first is around a risk management plan. So we've talked about a bit about this, about drawing up a risk management plan, which is quite simply looking at the different risks to which your business could be exposed, thinking about how likely they are to happen, and if they do happen, what would be the consequence, what would be the impact on your business, and then to have a contingency plan ready to go in the event of that risk becoming a factor in your business. So that is step one, is to think about the risks to which your business is exposed. And one of the risks could be that the risk of seasonal variation in your business, and that there's a seasonal element to your business, and that if during your peak times you don't have such a good run with your business, don't make as much money as you need, you could find yourself in financial difficulties. It might be there could be a climatic risk to your business. So one of my clients, her business was adversely affected by serious floods in Texas, which meant that her bookings, a lot of her bookings in peak time, in her peak season, were actually cancelled. Now, there's no way that she could have predicted that these floods were going to happen, but in advance. But that's where you need a risk management plan, because if you're living in an area where there can be some quite severe climatic events, and we saw that a lot last year with the hurricanes in Florida, around the Gulf of Mexico, up through the kind of southern states as well. So that would be another example where you would be wanting to think about risks to which your business is exposed. The second thing to think about is something called a PESTLE analysis. Now, a PESTLE analysis is basically a tool, a very simple tool that's used by marketers to analyse and monitor the macro environmental factors that are going to have an impact on your business, your organisation. So when I say macro environmental, I mean the external marketing environment, what's going on in the outside world. And the result of this PESTLE analysis is what's used to identify the threats and weaknesses which would go into your SWOT analysis. And the letters PESTLE, for those of you who are not familiar with this term, stand for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. So quite simply, what you do as a business owner is, as part of your annual review, you look at each of these letters, and you have a think about, is there anything going on in the external world that is political, that is economic, that is social, that is technological, that is environmental, that is legal, that could have an impact on my business? And when's that going to happen? What's the kind of the severity of the impact on my business, and what plans do I need to be putting in place right now to deal with that? And obviously the world doesn't move still, so whilst you would do this as part of your annual business review, if an event such as what's happening with Facebook is happening, and Facebook is a key part of your marketing strategy, then you're certainly going to be wanting to have a look at what does this mean for your business. So and how can I protect myself against this? So if you remember a while ago, there was a big change in Facebook algorithms, and people went from having huge engagement on their Facebook page to all of a sudden it was not quite crickets, but very, very little engagement with their business page at all, and it kind of took the feet from under the business. I'm not sure that's the right analogy, but you know what I mean. And this is something to think about now. Is there are lots of discussions going on Facebook and on social media and in the mainstream news about should I delete Facebook, and you know, you see people doing that now. You know, Facebook has something like 2.5 billion members or something like that across the globe. So you know, it's got huge and extensive reach. So I'm not suggesting for one moment that you come off this platform. I'm certainly going to continue using this platform well into the foreseeable future. But what it does mean, I think, is if you use Facebook a lot for promoting your business, like you do Facebook advertising, I think you want to think about if this really does gather momentum and a head of steam, which I think is, my assessment is that's highly likely, because there is, of all the factors that I've outlined that are going to unfold over the course of the next few weeks and months, because this is the press have got their teeth into Facebook right now. And so this is only going to gather some momentum. So I think that means that you want to think about your current marketing strategy and whether you need to diversify it. And I think you also, Instagram has not really been talked about, but I think it's also well worth thinking about Instagram, because obviously it's owned by Facebook and has the same data issues as Facebook as well. So you know, is there going to be a backlash against Instagram as well? Probably going to be slower than Facebook, because Facebook is right in the firing line at the moment. So my advice to you is to think about another platform that you want to cultivate and build a presence on, because you know, we all know building a platform is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly hard work. And so is it you know, time to look at another form of marketing, or look at look at another platform? So the platform that I'm looking at and being much more active on, and actually had decided to be more active on it paradoxically before this crisis started to unwind, is Twitter. And the logic to that for me was that I've got something like 31,500 followers over on Twitter. It's been much easier for me to build my platform over there. So you know, with that number of followers, it makes sense to me to make more use of that platform. So that is my advice to you, is to think about diversifying, because of the amount of time that it takes to build up a presence on any platform, and also to think about whether you need to add another type of marketing activity into your strategy or not. Then there's the question of looking at your own Facebook account and looking at the apps that have access to your data and whether you want them to have that access. So I'm going to post a link to an article that explains exactly how you can do that and how you can sort of unhook from these from any apps that you don't want to be. I think there's also something I've noticed on my profile is there are people that I'm friends with, and I swear I never friended them. It's like, you know, it's like I have no idea who these people are, and so I've unfriended them, and I've just sort of started to notice that. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my friends list, see exactly who I have friended, and from there unfriend anybody that I don't know who they are, and make sure that they don't have access to my data as well. So that is something that you can do. And then also, if you are in the US, then you have the option of lobbying your senators about compelling Zuckerberg to give evidence to key committees. So Mark Warner has been very active on this. I can't say her name. Amy Klobuchar has been very active on this, and Ron Wyden has been very active on this. So I always think it's very good to say, to contact anybody who is being very good on an issue, to say thank you and we really appreciate it, and then to get on to lobbying your own representatives as well, and to do the same thing here in the UK as well, to make sure that the Zuckerberg is giving evidence to our UK select committee. And here in the UK, we also have the option of the petition that I mentioned earlier as well, and signing a petition to demand effectively that Zuckerberg give evidence. So got the option of signing that petition and then sharing it on social media as well, and making sure that other people are aware of it too. So those are a few things that, as a business leader, that you can do or think about in relation to what is going on at Facebook. I've got a list of resources that you might enjoy reading, that you might find of benefit. So I'm going to add this to the link with this video so that you've got that too. And then just trying to think what else I wanted to cover in this. Oops. Got my notes in front of me, so just have a quick look at those just to see what else. Yeah, so I've got some resources I'm going to share for you. So just want to quickly circle back to the question that titles this video: is it too little, too late? I definitely think it's too little for all of the reasons that I've outlined. Way too little. Facebook has the resources to bring in the expertise that it needs to help it to manage this crisis. So at this point in time, I don't think it's too late. It really depends what it is that Facebook decides to do. So yes, I think it's way too little. No, I don't think at the moment it's too late, but that depends on it strengthening the capacity of the board and the people on the board, to have people with the right expertise and the ability to challenge and bring those onto the board, and also to bring in experts on brand management, the management of their reputation. I think they need to do that, and they also need to really strengthen their PR function as well, and bring in the very best experts to help them to manage that. And I think if they do those three things, then I think they've got a fighting chance of turning this around, coupled with things like being very cooperative with discussions about regulation at a government level, and coupled with sort of from the sort of tech side of things is taking the sort of actions and communicating those actions that are going to give people the confidence that they are taking care of our data. So that's where I think that is at. So I want to say a very big thank you to you for listening to me. It's quite a long video, but I think that there's a lot to unpack about this topic. So I hope that that has given you plenty to think about and been useful to you in the context of your own business. I'm going to be back next weekend with my Saturday musings. Not quite sure what it is that I'm going to talk about then, because I'm going to see what happens during the course of the week, what unfolds, and kind of react to that effectively. And I'm also going to be doing a video, a special live, probably on Twitter rather than Facebook this time, and I'll also be recording it to go up on YouTube, put up on my website, and that's going to be around Brexit. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly what I'm going to share just now. It was going to be about a conference that I went to on Friday about Brexit and business, where I had the very great fortune to listen to some of the very biggest names in British business speaking on this topic. So I was going to do something around that, but then since then events have moved on, and we've had the stories emerging around Cambridge Analytica role in the Leave campaign as well. So I'm going to have a think about exactly what I want to do around that, but I'm certainly going to be doing a Facebook Live in the week around Brexit as well. So if you're in the UK, I would love for you to tune in for that. You'll find out the details by my posts on social media, by subscribing to my email newsletter, because that's how you find out straight away what's going on with me and what I'm doing, and also on my website as well, because I will put up an article about that. You know, even if it's a relatively short announcement on my website, I will put something about that. So that about wraps it up for today. So I would love to know your thoughts on the scandal, the crisis enveloping Facebook. What you think it means for your business? Is there anything that you've thought about that I've not shared and discussed here that you think would be a valuable contribution to this discussion? I'd really, really love to hear from you. So please do post in the comments box below. I love reading your feedback, so please do take a moment to share and let me know your thoughts in the comments box below. And until the next time, thank you so much for tuning in.